Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the towering crystalline spires of the Galactic Confederation headquarters, clutching her worn leather satchel like a lifeline. The iridescent buildings stretched impossibly high into the purple-tinged sky of Centauri Prime, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 setting suns. After 6 months of intensive preparation, countless briefings, and one particularly nerve-wracking quantum jump through space, she was finally here. A gentle chime from her neural interface reminded her of the time. Your first meeting with the Cultural Exchange Committee begins in 15 minutes, Dr. Chen, the AI assistant whispered in her mind. She straightened her traditional Chinese kipao, carefully chosen to represent both her heritage and humanity's diverse cultural tapestry. The lobby of the headquarters was a cacophony of alien life. A group of Zethera, their crystalline bodies chiming softly as they moved, passed by in perfect synchronization. A massive Krax diplomat lumbered through on its 6 legs, its external thought sacs pulsing with contemplative patterns. In the corner, a cluster of Myrians floated in their containment spheres, their gaseous forms swirling in what Sarah recognized as their version of animated conversation. Dr. Chen, I presume. The voice came from behind her, melodic and precisely modulated. She turned to find herself face to face with Ambassador Tilara of the Valerian Collective, her appointed liaison. The ambassador's feathered crest shifted through shades of blue and green, a sign of polite interest that Sarah had studied extensively in her xenocultural briefings. Ambassador Tilara, it's an honor, Sarah replied, offering the traditional Valerian greeting, a slow bend of the neck with eyes closed. The ambassador's crest flickered briefly with surprise, then settled into a pleased purple hue. You've studied our customs, Tilara observed, leading Sarah toward the gravity lifts. Though I must admit, we expected your species might be overwhelmed by this gathering. Most emerging civilizations require several cycles to acclimate to the Confederation's diversity. Sarah smiled, remembering the countless first contact scenarios humanity had imagined in their fiction. Ambassador, humans have been preparing for this moment for centuries, through our stories, our art, our dreams of the stars. In a way, we've been rehearsing for this cultural exchange since we first looked up at the night sky and wondered who else was out there. The gravity lift hummed as it carried them upward through the crystalline tower. Through the transparent walls, Sarah could see the sprawling capital city below, a testament to the cooperation of 1,000 species. Hilara's crest shifted to a curious yellow, yet your species is so young compared to most Confederation members. What could Earth possibly contribute to our cultural repository? Before Sarah could respond, the lift doors opened onto chaos. The Cultural Exchange Committee chamber was in an uproar. Representatives from dozens of species were engaged in what appeared to be a heated debate, their universal translators struggling to keep up with the overlapping voices. You see, Tilara gestured to the scene. Even with all our advanced technology and millennia of diplomatic relations, we still struggle with basic cultural understanding between species. Sarah watched the scene unfold, her anthropologist's mind already analyzing the patterns of interaction. She noticed how the Krax delegates kept their thought sacs dim in deference to the light-sensitive Myrians, how the Zethera had positioned themselves to create harmonic resonance with their crystalline bodies, how even in conflict, these species were unconsciously adapting to accommodate each other. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small wooden flute hand-carved by her grandfather. Ambassador, she said, her eyes bright with purpose, I think it's time to show you humanity's first contribution to the Confederation. She stepped forward, ready to demonstrate how human culture had always excelled at one thing, bringing people together. The Cultural Exchange Committee chamber fell silent as the first notes of Sarah's flute drifted through the air. The simple wooden instrument, so primitive compared to the advanced technology surrounding them, produced a sound that cut through the chaos like a beam of sunlight through storm clouds. She began with a traditional Chinese melody her grandfather had taught her, letting the ancient tune tell its story of mountains and rivers, of dawn breaking over misty peaks. The Mirian delegates' gaseous forms began to pulse in rhythm with the music, their containment spheres resonating with each note. The Zethyrus crystalline bodies automatically adjusted their harmonic frequencies to match the flute's vibrations, creating an unexpected accompaniment. "Fascinating," Tilera whispered, her crest cycling through colors Sarah had never seen before. "Their autonomic responses. They're synchronizing with your sound patterns." Sarah transitioned smoothly into a West African drumming pattern, tapping the rhythm against her flute's body. The Crack's delegates' thought sacs began pulsing in time, their six-legged bodies swaying slightly. One of them, the eldest by the patterns on its carapace, approached her with uncharacteristic speed. "You create harmony without technology." The Crack's elder's translator rendered its complex clicking sounds. "How is this possible? Our species has spent millennia developing harmonic resonance chambers for interspecies communication, yet you achieve similar results with carved wood." Sarah lowered her flute, but kept tapping the rhythm. "On Earth, we have a saying, music is a universal language. Long before we had universal translators or quantum communications, humans used music to bridge cultural divides. Every human culture, no matter how different, developed its own musical traditions." A Zethara representative stepped forward, its crystalline form shimmering with interest. "We detect no standard communication protocols in these sound patterns, yet our bodies respond automatically. This requires further study." The chamber's atmosphere had transformed. Where there had been tension and frustration, now curiosity and wonder filled the air. Sarah reached into her satchel again, this time pulling out a small holoprojector. "Let me show you something," she said, activating the device. The air filled with images from Earth, an orchestra performing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, a traditional Maori haka, Brazilian capoeiristas moving to the rhythm of the berimbau, a Japanese taiko drum ensemble, and an Arab oud player performing with a jazz quartet. Each of these traditions developed independently, Sarah explained as the aliens watched, transfixed. But when they meet, they can create something new, something that transcends their origins. "We call it fusion." She tapped her neural interface, and the holoprojector shifted to show contemporary performances where these traditions merged and evolved. The Marian delegate who had been most vocal in the earlier argument drifted closer. "Your species deliberately combines distinct cultural sound patterns, without concern for dilution or corruption of the original forms." Sarah smiled. "We preserve our traditional forms while also allowing them to grow and change. That's how culture stays alive." She picked up her flute again. Would anyone like to try creating something new together? What followed was unprecedented in Confederation history. The Zetharae used their crystalline bodies to create complex harmonic foundations. The Mirians manipulated their containment spheres to produce deep, resonant tones. The Cracks contributed percussion with their chidnus plates, and weaving through it all was the sound of Sarah's wooden flute, bridging the gaps between alien harmonies. Hilera watched in amazement as species that had been arguing moments before found themselves creating something together, something that had never existed until this moment. Her crest settled into a deep, satisfied purple. "Dr. Chen," she said quietly, "I believe I understand now what humanity brings to the Confederation. You don't just adapt to diversity, you thrive on it." Sarah nodded, still playing. Above them, the chamber's atmospheric analyzers registered something extraordinary. Despite their different physiologies and atmospheric requirements, every species present was producing nearly identical endorphin-equivalent responses. Through music, they had found a common language of emotion itself. Chef Miguel Rodriguez stood in his newly installed kitchen aboard Centauri Prime's diplomatic sector, surrounded by ingredients from a dozen worlds. The gleaming surfaces of his cooking station reflected the soft bioluminescent lighting, a stark contrast to his well-worn earth-made knives and the ancient cast iron pan his abuela had given him. "You realize this endeavor is highly irregular." The health and safety inspector, a towering Arcturian named Vex, waved all four arms in exasperation. Nutrient distribution is handled by automated systems. The concept of manual food preparation is primitive. Miguel grinned as he expertly diced what looked like iridescent mushrooms from the Pleiades sector. With respect, Administrator Vex, there's nothing primitive about this. Watch. He tossed the mushrooms into the sizzling pan, and the air filled with an aroma that made the Arcturian's sensory tendrils quiver involuntarily. What is that sensation? Vex asked, all 6 eyes widening. That, my friend, is the Maillard reaction. The same chemical process that made our ancestors gather around cooking fires thousands of years ago. Miguel added earth-grown garlic and herbs to the pan, then a splash of Centaurian fire wine. The flames leaped high, drawing gasps from the small crowd of officials that had gathered to inspect his controversial new establishment. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been quietly observing from the corner, stepped forward. Administrator Vex, you're experiencing something humans discovered millennia ago. Food can be more than mere sustenance. It can be art, culture, and communication all at once. A Mirian diplomat drifted closer in their containment sphere, their gaseous form swirling with interest. But your biological requirements are specific to your species. How can this be relevant to the broader Confederation? Miguel's smile widened as he plated his creation. On each dish, the iridescent mushrooms have been transformed into something entirely new, their natural bioluminescence enhanced by the cooking process. He had arranged them in patterns that mimicked the sacred geometries of various Confederation species. Try it, he encouraged, having carefully researched each species' dietary requirements and chemical tolerances. I've adapted the preparation methods to be safe and digestible for each of your physiologies. One by one, the gathered officials sampled the dish. The reaction was immediate and unprecedented. The Arcturian's sensory tendrils began to glow, a sign of intense pleasure. The Mirian's gaseous form shifted through rainbow hues. Even the stoic Zethra representative's crystalline form chimed with harmonic appreciation. This is irregular, Vex muttered, but their arms were already reaching for another bite. The nutrient distribution is inefficient, the preparation time excessive, and yet it brings us together. Sarah completed the thought, just like the music did. Human cuisine isn't just about efficiency. It's about connection, about sharing experiences across boundaries. Miguel moved smoothly to his next demonstration, bringing out a device he'd engineered with help from Confederation scientists. Watch this, he said, activating what looked like a molecular gastronomy setup merged with alien technology. By understanding the chemical preferences of different species, we can create dishes that resonate across physiological barriers. He proceeded to prepare a dessert that incorporated elements from each major member species' home world: Earth chocolate, Arcturian light crystals, Mirian vapor essences, and more. The result was a dish that could be simultaneously enjoyed by multiple species, each experiencing it in their own unique way. You've created a shared experience through chemical synthesis, the Mirian diplomat observed, their containment sphere humming with excitement. This has implications for diplomatic relations. Sarah watched as the gathered officials began to relax, their formal postures easing as they discussed the flavors and sensations they were experiencing. She saw what Miguel had accomplished. He had turned his restaurant into more than just a novelty. It was becoming a space where species could literally share a taste of each other's worlds. In ancient Earth cultures, she explained to the increasingly enthusiastic crowd, the sharing of food was sacred. To break bread together was to forge bonds of trust and friendship. And now, thanks to Chef Rodriguez, we can extend that tradition to the stars. The emergency session of the Confederation Council stretched into its 4th cycle. The Arcturian and Mirian delegations remained locked in bitter conflict over mining rights in the Carina Nebula, their centuries-old tensions threatening to rupture the fragile peace of the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Chen watched from her observer's position as countless diplomatic protocols failed one after another. The nebula has been Mirian territory since before the Arcturians achieved spaceflight. The Marian speaker's translation rang through the chamber, their gaseous form roiling with anger inside their containment sphere. Yet you lack the physical form to harvest its resources, the Arcturian High Commissioner countered, all four arms gesturing in frustration. Billions suffer energy shortages while the nebula's potential remains untapped. Sarah leaned forward, her mind racing through Earth's historical archives. The situation felt strangely familiar. She activated her neural interface, requesting permission to address the council. Lara, now serving as moderator, noticed the request and tilted her head curiously, her crest shifting to a thoughtful blue. "The council recognizes Dr. Chen of Earth," Lara announced, causing a ripple of surprise through the chamber. It was unprecedented for a representative of such a young species to speak during a critical diplomatic crisis. Sarah stood, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Honored delegates, your conflict reminds me of a story from Earth's history, the tale of two sisters and an orange." The chamber fell silent, curiosity temporarily overwhelming anger. Even the Zethra delegates' crystalline forms stilled their constant harmonic humming to listen. Two sisters fought bitterly over the last orange in their home. Sarah continued, activating a small holoprojector to illustrate the tale. Each claimed they needed it more. Their argument nearly destroyed their relationship until a wise parent asked each sister why they wanted the orange. The hologram showed the story as she spoke. The first sister needed the orange's juice for a drink. The second needed the peel for a cake recipe. They had been fighting over the whole orange when each only needed a part. A solution that would have been obvious if they'd shared their true needs instead of their surface demands. The Arcturian High Commissioner's sensory tendrils twitched. You compare a galactic-scale resource dispute to a children's tale about fruit. I'm suggesting that human history is filled with similar conflicts, and their resolutions often came not from focusing on positions, but on underlying needs. Sarah gestured to the nebula's holographic display. The Marians claim ancestral territory, but what they truly value is the preservation of the nebula's unique energy patterns, which are part of their cultural heritage. The Arcturians speak of harvesting resources, but their real concern is the suffering of energy-poor worlds. She manipulated the display, highlighting different sectors of the nebula. Human history taught us that the most lasting solutions come from understanding each other's stories. What if we found a way to harvest the nebula's resources using Marian traditional energy-gathering techniques, scaled up with Arcturian technology? The Marians could preserve their heritage, while the Arcturians could help distribute energy to those in need. The chamber erupted in murmurs as both delegations fell silent, considering. Lara's crest cycled through thoughtful shades of purple and green. A human folk tale. The Marian speaker's gaseous form swirled contemplatively. Yet it contains wisdom applicable to our situation. Perhaps we have been too focused on what divides us. The Arcturian High Commissioner's sensory tendrils relaxed slightly. Our engineering corps could adapt our harvesting methods to incorporate Marian energy-gathering traditions. It would be inefficient, but culturally significant. Sarah smiled, remembering countless human stories of conflict and reconciliation. Sometimes the most efficient solution isn't the best one. Sometimes we need to take the longer path to preserve what matters most. As the two delegations began discussing cooperative approaches, Lara drifted to Sarah's side. "You used a simple story to shift their perspective," she observed, her crest glowing with admiration. "Perhaps humanity's greatest gift to the Confederation isn't your technology or your arts, but your ability to find wisdom in simplicity." The newly constructed Galactic Sports Complex on Centauri Prime hummed with an energy that made Dr. Sarah Chen's skin tingle. Thousands of beings from across the Confederation had gathered for what the media was calling the most ambitious cultural experiment since first contact, the inaugural Interspecies Games. "This is highly unconventional," Lara observed from beside her, the ambassador's crest flickering between anxiety and excitement. "Competitive physical activities for recreation. Many species still struggle to understand why humans would expend energy without practical purpose." Sarah watched as a team of Zethra crystal forms, took position on one of the newly designed anti-gravity courts. Their opponents, a mixed group of humans and Arcturians, stretched in their environmental suits. "That's exactly why we needed to create new sports," she explained. "Games that play to different species' natural abilities while encouraging cooperation." The game they were watching, called Luminance, had been developed by a committee of human sports designers and xenobiologists. The Zethra's natural ability to manipulate light through their crystalline bodies was balanced by the Arcturians' multiple limbs and humans' quick reflexes. The objective was to guide a sphere of pure energy through a series of dimensional gates while preventing it from destabilizing. "Remarkable," Tilara whispered as a human player launched herself through zero gravity, using an Arcturian teammate's momentum to redirect the energy sphere through a particularly challenging gate. The Zethra responded by creating a prismatic array that split the sphere into multiple trajectories, drawing gasps from the crowd. In another arena, Chef Miguel Rodriguez was overseeing what he called the culinary pentathlon, where teams competed to create dishes that satisfied the sensory requirements of 5 different species simultaneously. "It's not just about the food," he had explained to the skeptical organizers. "It's about understanding each other's needs and finding creative solutions." Sarah's neural interface chirped with an incoming message from the medical station. "Dr. Chen, you need to see this." The chief xenobiologist's excitement was palpable even through text. "We're recording unprecedented levels of positive neurochemical responses across all participating species. The act of play is creating biological harmony we didn't think possible." She made her way to the central arena, where the day's main event was about to begin. Mind Maze was perhaps the most ambitious of the new sports, combining elements of Earth's chess, Parcheesi, and Go with psychic challenges that appealed to more mentally focused species like the Mirians. "The beauty of games," Sarah explained to a gathering of junior diplomats, "is that they create a safe space to explore conflict and cooperation. Humans have used sports for millennia to bridge cultural divides and channel competitive instincts constructively." A young Crax delegate raised its sensory appendages in confusion. "But how can such activities contribute to the Confederation's efficiency? They serve no practical purpose, don't they?" Sarah smiled as she watched a human child teaching a Mirian youth how to play a simplified version of catch, the Mirian's containment sphere bobbing gently to intercept the soft light ball. "Look around you. When was the last time you saw so many species choosing to spend time together, learning about each other, without any diplomatic protocol or official purpose?" The stadium erupted in cheers as the Mind Maze match reached a dramatic conclusion, a team of Mirians and humans having worked together to create a winning strategy that no single species could have devised alone. Tilara's crest had settled into a deep, satisfied purple. "I begin to understand," she said softly. "Through play, you create connections that formal diplomacy cannot achieve. These games are not truly about competition at all, are they?" Sarah watched as teams exchanged their equivalent of handshakes across species barriers, many lingering to discuss strategies or simply enjoy each other's company. "Games give us a reason to come together, to learn each other's strengths and limitations. But more importantly, they remind us that sometimes the joy is in playing, not winning." The Confederation's Technology Review Board sat in stunned silence as the demonstration concluded. Dr. Sarah Chen removed her neural interface crown while the alien delegates emerged from their species-specific immersion pods. The virtual reality experience they had just shared, a recreation of Earth's Great Barrier Reef, had left them speechless. "Impossible." The Zethra technical advisor's crystalline form vibrated with agitation. "Your species developed this technology for entertainment." "Not just entertainment," Sarah explained, helping a visibly moved Mirian diplomat stabilize their containment sphere. "We created it to preserve experiences, to share perspectives, to teach empathy. The Great Barrier Reef you just experienced. It's been gone for 50 years, destroyed by climate change. But through VR, we can still learn from it, feel what it was like to be there. Ambassador Tylera's crest had been cycling through colors nonstop since she emerged from her pod. The emotional resonance. It's unlike anything in our database. Most species develop virtual reality for practical applications. Training, simulation, technical education. But this is what happens when you let artists and dreamers work alongside scientists, came a new voice. Dr. Raj Patel, Earth's leading VR architect, stepped into the chamber. His traditional Indian formal wear stood out among the utilitarian Confederation uniforms. Humanity learned long ago that technology without soul is just machinery. He gestured, and the chamber's holographic displays came to life, showing hundreds of new virtual experiences being developed in his Earth-based studio. We're not just recreating places or moments, he continued. We're building bridges between different ways of experiencing reality. A demonstration showed how the team had created a virtual space where Myrians could experience the sensation of having a solid form, while physical species could understand what it meant to exist as a gaseous consciousness. Another program allowed Zethera to share their unique perception of crystalline harmonics with other species. But the processing requirements must be astronomical. The crack's technical chief objected, its thought sacs pulsing with calculations, to simulate so many different perceptual frameworks simultaneously. Raj smiled. That's where human ingenuity came in. We discovered that by focusing on emotional and experiential truth rather than perfect physical simulation, we could create more meaningful interactions with far fewer resources. Sarah activated another program, and the chamber transformed into a virtual representation of ancient Rome. Consider this, she said as the delegates marveled at the detail. We're not just showing you what Rome looked like. You're experiencing how it felt to walk those streets, to live in that time. The sounds, the smells, the social dynamics, all adapted for each species' perceptual framework. The applications for diplomatic relations are significant, Tylera observed, watching as a virtual marketplace came to life around them. To truly understand another species' perspective. Exactly, Sarah agreed. But we didn't stop there. Show them. Raj. The scientist activated the system's crown jewel, a collaborative virtual space where artists from different species could create together, each working in their native medium, but contributing to a shared masterpiece. They watched as a human painter, a Myrian vapor sculptor, and a Zethera crystal harmonist collaborated on a piece that existed simultaneously in multiple perceptual dimensions. This is why we call it a digital renaissance, Raj explained as the artwork took shape. Just as Earth's original renaissance was born from the fusion of art, science, and cultural exchange, this new movement is breaking down barriers we once thought insurmountable. The Technology Review Board members conferred briefly, their decision unprecedented in its swiftness. Earth's VR innovation was to be immediately fast-tracked for Confederation-wide implementation. But it was Tylera's personal observation that captured the moment's significance. Once again, she said, her crest glowing with a new color Sarah had never seen before, humanity has shown us that what we considered technological limitations were actually limitations of imagination. You don't just use tools, you transform them into bridges between souls. The Confederation's Grand Assembly Hall had never seen anything quite like this. Instead of the usual formal seating arrangement, the space had been cleared for what Dr. Sarah Chen had called a diplomatic performance. The tension in the room was palpable. The ongoing trade dispute between the Krax Hive and the Valerian Collective threatened to destabilize an entire sector of space. You believe this? Dance. We'll resolve our differences. The Krax Queen's translator rendered her clicks with obvious skepticism. Her massive form dominated one side of the hall, while the Valerian delegation's shimming feathered crests created a living aurora on the other. Sarah stood in the center, wearing a simple black leotard. Behind her, a diverse group of human dancers waited, each specialized in different Earth traditions. Dance has been a form of storytelling, conflict resolution, and spiritual expression on Earth for as long as we've existed, she explained. Today, We'll show you why." She nodded to Maya Henderson, a classical ballet dancer, who began moving to music that seemed to defy gravity itself. Her movements told the story of the trade dispute from the Valerian perspective. Their need for specific resources, their traditional trading routes, their fear of change. The Valerians' crests rippled in recognition as their position was expressed not in words, but in motion. Next came James Two Rivers, performing a traditional indigenous American dance that captured the Crax's territorial concerns. The stamping rhythms and powerful movements resonated with the Crax Queen's guards, their thought sacs pulsing in time with his steps. "Fascinating," Tilara murmured from her observer's position. "The emotional resonance is registering across species boundaries, just like with music." But Sarah wasn't finished. She stepped forward herself, beginning a contemporary piece that wove together elements of both previous dances. In human dance, she explained as she moved, we can hold multiple truths at once. We can express conflict and resolution in the same moment. Other dancers joined her, creating patterns that seemed chaotic at first, but resolved into perfect harmony. A Kathak dancer's precise movements represented the mathematical precision of trade calculations. A capoeirista's fluid acrobatics demonstrated the flexibility needed in negotiations. A Chinese ribbon dancer created patterns in the air that mimicked the flow of goods between worlds. The Crax Queen's antennae quivered. The patterns, they represent potential trade routes. Yes, Sarah confirmed, never stopping her movement. But more than that, they show how different approaches can coexist. Watch. The dancers began to interact in new ways. The ballet dancer and the capoeirista created a duet that seemed impossible, each supporting the other's weight in turns. The Kathak dancer's rhythmic footwork provided a foundation for the ribbon dancer's aerial patterns. Different styles, different traditions, all working together to create something new. Just as these dance forms evolved on Earth by influencing each other, Sarah continued, her breathing controlled despite the exertion. Your trading systems can evolve too. Not by abandoning tradition, but by finding new ways to move together. The Valerian High Counselor's crest shifted to a thoughtful blue. The way the dancers support each other while maintaining their distinct styles, it suggests possibilities we hadn't considered. Indeed, the Crax Queen clicked softly. Perhaps our traditional trade routes could be maintained while incorporating new patterns of exchange. As the performance reached its climax, the dancers created a living mandala of movement, each style distinct yet perfectly integrated into the whole. The assembly hall hummed with a new energy as ancient species saw their conflicts transformed into art, their differences celebrated rather than resolved. "Movement never lies," Sarah quoted her old dance teacher as the performance concluded. "When we dance, we tell the truth about who we are and what we need. Sometimes, that truth is exactly what diplomacy requires." 5 years after the Cultural Exchange Initiative began, Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the podium of the newly inaugurated Galactic Cultural Institute on Earth. The massive structure, designed by a collaborative team of human and alien architects, seamlessly blended elements from 1,000 worlds. Through its transparent dome, the stars shone brilliantly, reminding everyone present of the vast cosmos that had brought them together. "When we first joined the Confederation," Sarah began, her voice carrying across the assembled dignitaries, "many wondered what Earth could possibly contribute to a galaxy of ancient civilizations. We had no 1,000-year quantum drives, no planetary terraforming technology, no faster-than-light communication systems that weren't borrowed from our new allies." She gestured to the holoprojections surrounding the hall, each showing scenes from the past 5 years. The first interspecies games, Chef Rodriguez's restaurant now franchised across 17 systems, the virtual reality cultural exchange programs that had transformed education throughout the Confederation, and the new diplomatic dance protocols that had prevented 3 potential conflicts in the past year alone. "But we brought something else," she continued, catching Tulara's eye in the crowd, the ambassador's crest glowing with pride. "We brought the one thing that all our art, Music, cuisine, and games had taught us over millennia of human civilization the power of connection. Around the hall, evidence of that connection was everywhere. A group of Zethra crystal forms had adapted their harmonics to accompany a human string quartet. Myriad youth in their containment spheres practiced dance movements with human children. A Crack's delegation sampled Chef Rodriguez's latest fusion cuisine while discussing trade agreements with Valerian merchants. The Galactic Cultural Institute isn't just a building or an organization, Sarah explained, her voice thick with emotion. It's a promise that as we reach for the stars, we won't forget what makes us human. Our ability to create, to adapt, to find beauty in our differences, and to share that beauty with others. Tilara floated to the stage, her crest cycling through colors that the human audience had learned to recognize as deep joy. 5 years ago, I thought I was being assigned to mentor a primitive species, she admitted to the gathered crowd. Instead, I found myself learning lessons that thousands of years of Confederation history hadn't taught us. Humans showed us that efficiency isn't always the highest goal, that sometimes the longest path is the most worthwhile, and that what we considered primitive was actually profound. The main doors of the Institute opened, revealing the sprawling campus that would soon welcome students and cultural ambassadors from across the galaxy. The architecture itself told a story. Each building incorporated elements from different species' artistic traditions, creating spaces where all could feel at home while experiencing something new. But perhaps the most important thing we've learned from humans, Tilara continued, is that culture isn't static. It grows, changes, and evolves through contact with others. Thanks to humanity's influence, the Confederation is no longer just an alliance of convenience. We're becoming a true community. Sarah touched the simple wooden flute that still hung at her belt, remembering that first chaotic meeting 5 years ago. As we open the doors of this institute, we're not just preserving our various cultures, we're creating something new together. Every piece of music that combines human instruments with Zethra harmonics, every dish that brings together flavors from a dozen worlds, every dance that tells our shared stories. These are the building blocks of a galactic civilization that celebrates its diversity. She looked out at the assembled beings, no longer divided by species, but mingled together in friendship. This is humanity's gift to the stars, not the things we've made, but the connections we've helped forge. And this is just the beginning. As if to punctuate her words, the string quartet and Zethra harmonics swelled into a new composition, one that could never have existed before Earth joined the Confederation. Under the starlit dome, representatives of 1,000 worlds listened together, each hearing something unique yet sharing in something universal, the sound of barriers falling away, one note at a time.